Today's critique examines a video transcript discussing the potential revival of MySpace and the growing cultural pushback against algorithm-driven social media. And, right out of the gate, while the material successfully taps into a genuine, relatable frustration with AI and algorithms, we are going to focus on tightening the structure, deepening the thematic connections, and elevating the final takeaway.
Yeah, that's definitely the right approach here.
Because, if you look at the source material, there's this brief conversational drift early on. They move from talking about NeoCities and nostalgic web design straight into personal collections of 90s toys, like Strawberry Shortcake and Old Pony.
Right, it's quite the pivot.
It really is. But when looking at this tangent about physical toy collection, I wonder, isn't building a physical shelf of toys basically the offline equivalent of hand-coding a GeoCities page? Like, how can the creators make this connection intentional rather than accidental?
Well, harnessing the natural conversational tangents about NeoCities and personal collections can significantly reinforce the core argument if explicitly tied back to the concept of intentional curation.
Okay, yeah, intentional curation.
Exactly. Because the weakness right now is that this lengthy, unguided deviation into personal collections of Strawberry Shortcake, She-Ra, and Fig Boot Critters currently feels disconnected from the broader social media news.
It just kind of leaves the listener hanging, right?
It does, and it risks a loss of momentum, which ends up diluting the main thesis about the internet. So the suggestion is to frame these nostalgic, real-world tangents as direct physical metaphors for the old internet appeal.
Oh, I like that. So you transform a seemingly random aside into a deliberate, supporting pillar of the argument.
That's the goal. And for some concrete examples, they could transition into the toy discussion by explicitly stating something like, curating a NeoCities page feels just like organizing a physical collection.
Right. It instantly gives the listener a framework for why we're suddenly talking about plastic toys.
Yes, exactly. And it can push that further, like use the act of hunting for a specific vintage toy as a parallel to the host's story about hunting for SNES 9X updates via bookmark.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because in both cases, you're looking at the joy of active discovery over, algorithmic spoon-feeding.
Exactly. When you hunt for a toy, you're putting in effort. When you dug for an emulator update in 1999, you had to follow dead links and read weird forums.
The friction was part of the fun.
Right, and modern feeds just spoon-feed you. But, and this is important, they should probably cut the granular listing of specific toy brands slightly short.
Just to pivot back to the main point?
Yeah, just to emphasize that this level of niche, unmonetized passion is exactly what the modern internet lacks. You don't need to list every 90s brand to make that point.
No, you really don't. A tight metaphor is so much punchier. And speaking of authentic human hobbies like toys and retro gaming, the material eventually moves to that OpenAI influencer event at the Wildflower Resort.
Oh, right, the beekeeping thing.
Yeah, where they shift from organic human interest to corporate mandated nature. And I just have to push back a bit here because the material brings up the OpenAI event with beekeeping and farm-to-table cooking. But could this corporate real-world simulation actually be seen as the ultimate algorithm trying to generate a human experience, making it the perfect foil to the MySpace revival?
That is such a fascinating angle. The juxtaposition of the OpenAI influencer event with the MySpace revival offers a missed opportunity for profound commentary on digital versus physical authenticity.
A missed opportunity how, exactly?
Well, the weakness is that the transition from the thought catalog news about a feed-free MySpace to the OpenAI resort event lacks a clear thematic bridge.
They just kind of jumped straight into it.
Exactly, leaving the listener to do the heavy lifting of figuring out why these two distinct events are being discussed back to back.
Which is tough for the audience, so what's the fix?
The suggestion is to explicitly contrast the forced, artificial humanity of the OpenAI PR event with the organic, user-driven authenticity that the MySpace revival and NeoCities promise. And they should use the material's own Monsanto and Disney analogy as the anchor.
Okay. Yeah, that analogy was brilliant, but it felt a little buried. How do they bring it to the front?
As a concrete example, they need to draw a direct line between the two events. They could say something like, while MySpace wants to give you the tools to walk away from the screen, OpenAI is paying influencers $3,000 a night to pretend they know how to walk away from the screen.
Wow, yeah, that is a fantastic contrast. It just perfectly frames them as opposite reaction to the exact same cultural fatigue.
It really does. And for another concrete example, they can expand on that excellent Monsanto analogy already in the text to describe modern social media platforms as a whole.
Right, because algorithms offer what look like organic connection, but they're entirely engineered by corporate interest.
Exactly. Just like a chemically treated farm. It looks like nature, but it's completely sterile.
It's all about maximizing yield, or in this case, dwell.
Right. And they should highlight the core irony here. AI companies are using farm-to-table cooking to prove human value, while old-school internet users use basic HTML code to prove theirs.
Oh, that's such a good point. The old web used machines to express humanity, and the new web uses synthetic humanity to hide the machine.
That's exactly the dynamic at play.
It's just so heavily capitalized now, which, actually moves us perfectly from the conceptual clash of authentic versus corporate internet to the literal survival of these platforms.
The economics of it all.
Right. The source material briefly mentions that the old internet didn't make money and that the Vanderhook brothers lost an estimated $150 million on the MySpace deal.
Yeah, that's a staggering amount of money.
It is. And it is incredibly easy to romanticize 1998 and chronological feeds. But when the massive server bills for this revived MySpace come due, isn't this no algorithm, log-off pitch mathematically impossible in today's ad-supported creator economy?
It absolutely is. Addressing the inescapable paradox of monetizing a non-algorithmic platform will elevate the discussion from simple nostalgia to a cutting-edge industry critique.
Because right now it feels like they avoid the hard math.
They do. The weakness is that the material acknowledges the internet went sideways when corporations took over or monetized social media, but it ends on a purely whimsical note about finding a happy medium.
Which doesn't really answer the question.
No, it leaves a massive "so what" hanging in the air. Like, how can creators or platforms actually survive a rollback to the 2000s model?
Because a happy medium isn't a business model, right?
Exactly. So the suggestion is to challenge the audience directly with the reality of this paradox in the conclusion. They need to force a forward-looking debate about the future of the creator economy, rather than just a retrospective longing for the past.
I love that. So how do they challenge the audience?
Well, as a concrete example, they could pose a direct question to the audience at the end. Something like, would you actually be willing to pay a monthly subscription fee for a MySpace without an algorithm?
Oh, wow. Because the honest answer for most people is probably no.
Right. People want the massive bandwidth and infinite connectivity, but they want it free.
And tailored to their exact nostalgic specifications.
Exactly. And another concrete example is to discuss the profound irony of the creator's own situation. As creators, asking for subscriptions, which the hosts do at the end of the transcript, an algorithmic rollback would severely limit their own discoverability.
That is such a good point. If MySpace goes back to just a chronological, isolated friend network, how does anyone ever find this video essay in the first place?
They don't. The viral growth that funds the modern creator class fundamentally relies on algorithms feeding content to strangers.
Yeah, leaning into that tension shows so much self-awareness.
It does. And finally, for one last concrete example, they should use the Coke commercial mentioned in the text as the ultimate symbol of this paradox.
Oh, right. The one telling Gen Z to log off but remember to drink Coke?
Yes. Platforms telling you to log off still desperately need you to buy the product. It perfectly captures how the internet cannot actually afford for you to log off.
It's essentially a self-destruct sequence masked as a wellness campaign. I mean, that is just a fantastic way to end the piece. It forces the audience to really look at the structural reality of the internet they're currently sitting.
Exactly. It turns a nostalgic sigh into a sharp, urgent question.
Well, we've covered a massive amount of ground in this critique today. Just to quickly recap our three main takeaways. First, anchor natural tangents by framing them as metaphors for active curation.
Right. Tie the toys back to the tech.
Exactly. Second, use the OpenAI event as a direct thematic contrast to organic internet culture.
The synthetic humanity hiding the machine.
Perfect. And third, confront the monetization paradox head-on to give the piece a sharper, forward-looking edge. So the actionable summary for the creators here is to implement intentional transitions between those disparate news items, lean into the paradoxes of the creator economy, and just make sure every nostalgic tangent explicitly serves the core thesis of algorithm fatigue.
That covers all the bases.
It really does. So we warmly invite the listener to apply these structural and thematic tweaks and to submit their next draft or future materials back to the critique for further exploration. Keep digging, keep refining, and we will catch you next time.